Maybe you already know exactly where you want to invest, or you've got a few ideas in the back of your mind and you need to know how to narrow it down and find one area. This process is going to help you do exactly that, whether it confirms what you already think to be true, or it helps you rule out some of the contenders that aren't as strong as your best area. So I like to call this the heat map process, and I'm going to switch over to my laptop and I'm going to show you exactly how I go through this. What we're looking for here is an understanding of what makes a good area for an HMO, what makes a great place for your tenants to live. So we're going to be looking at things like public transport links, big employers in the area, shops and amenities, all the things that your prospective tenants are going to be looking for when they're assessing whether or not they want to move into your house. The first thing that you want to do is to get a map of the area or the areas that you're interested in, and the best place to do this is Google Maps. So head over there, and for the purposes of this exercise I am going to look at two areas that I'm interested in, Stockport and Macclesfield, purely to show you how I would run through this process for my own areas. I know them well, I know the different hotspots and the places that are of importance to tenants, so it will make this process really easy to explain. But you can do exactly the same thing wherever you are interested in. So let's start off with Stockport. I'm going to head over and type in Stockport to Google Maps, pull up a map, and what I want to do is to zoom in on the area that I am interested in. I know the area to the north of Stockport is Article 4, or covered by Article 4, so I'm going to leave that out. I'm really interested in this corridor that runs down on the A6 from north to south. I want to be able to highlight different elements of importance on this map. So you've got a couple of options for doing that. You can go old school and print it off and get a highlighter pen, or what I like to do is take a screenshot and then open it up in an image editing application like Photoshop or even something like Microsoft Paint. What I want to start doing is highlighting areas of importance to our tenants, things that are going to appeal to them. And I've got a highlighter selected here that's about 1 kilometre in diameter, so about half a mile, reasonable walking distance for things like employment and public transport. And let's start off by picking out some of the key features of my area. Firstly, there are several train stations, so I'm just going to highlight them. And I'm going to highlight the major commuter bus route into Manchester city centre as well. Stockport is a great commuter town, so a lot of people who are looking to move here will want it to be accessible for the city centre. Once we've got the major public transport options marked on, I like to start looking at the employment options in the area. And I know Stockport has got a couple of big hospitals which attract a lot of young nurses and doctors and general administrative staff. So you can always look for the hospitals in your area by heading over to Google Maps again. If you delete the area but leave that area in the map and type in hospitals, it will show you all of the hospitals in that area. And it will bring up lots of different options. Some of them won't be medical hospitals, some might just be businesses with the word hospital in their name, or vet surgeons and things like that. But what you're looking for is these big capital H's on the map. That indicates a hospital of a reasonable size. And I'm going to go ahead and mark both of these in Stockport on our map as well. And you can do exactly the same for any big, well-recognized establishment like that. So for example, you can replace hospital with university, with school, with airport, and it will bring up all of those within the area that you have searched for, which is a great way of quickly seeing what is available in the area that you're targeting. Then I'm going to add in the town centre locations. We've got a big one here for Stockport's main town centre, and then a couple of smaller ones dotted around village centres realistically, but places with shops and bars and restaurants and, general places of employment. Then finally for this heat map, I'm going to add on Stockport College, which is just here. I know from experience that the majority of students who go to Stockport College typically are from the area and still live at home with their parents. So it's not going to be a huge source of tenants for us, but it is a big employer in the area, so that's going to be interesting for me as well. And what you'll start to see is clusters forming in particular areas, and that is what you want. That is the ideal situation, when you start to see lots of these little things adding up in a particular area. In this instance, I think there's 3 clear clusters. One at the north, And I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but I'm already starting to think, okay, well, the north has got good capital appreciation, but equally it's going to have higher property prices. So that's going to be a different model to the town centre, where capital appreciation will be a bit lower, but you can typically get properties for a bit cheaper. But like I say, we've got one in the north, we've got one around the town centre, and then one area round about the hospital and a lot of the train stations that are clustered down there. So that's starting to give me an idea of the areas that I'm going to start my property search in. And it goes to prove that there is going to be demand in these areas. There are the right mix of amenities and public services that will attract tenants, and that is exactly what we are looking for when we're doing this heat map exercise. Now let's take a look at one more example, and this time I'll use Macclesfield, which is another area of interest to me. First thing I want to do is, as with the time before, start to highlight some of the key places of interest. Now, if we look around Macclesfield town centre, what we have got is a hospital on the west, which is another big employer. We have got this area, which is the town centre, and then just to the east of the town centre is the train station, all within about a 5-10 minute walk of each other. In the north, Google has quite nicely told me that there is a big employer up there called AstraZeneca, a big company who employ lots of people in the area. Now, when you're looking on the outskirts of a town like this, typically the type of place that AstraZeneca are going to be having a big office is on the outskirts, and people won't necessarily live right around it. So I'm not overly bothered about the area immediately surrounding it, but what it does make me think immediately is that big employer in the area, lots of money, lots of young graduates coming to town, so good from finding a tenant's point of view. Obviously then I'm going to mark on the major bus routes and commuter routes as well, which I'll just highlight here. And again, you've got a real clear cluster around the town centre. As you saw with the Stockport example, there were 3 different clusters, all around different things. Macclesfield is a bit of a smaller town, so the cluster is typically going to be round about the main hub of activity. And you can see one of the reasons it's of particular interest to us is that we have just bought a property which is highlighted by this little red dot, right between the hospital, the town centre and the train station, so an absolutely ideal location for us. What you always want to keep at the back of your mind when you're doing a heat map exercise is what your target tenants are going to be looking for. Obviously for students, proximity to the university is going to be much more important than it is to young professionals or LHA tenants. Similarly, you've got to think about who's going to be driving their own cars and who's going to be more reliant on public transport, for example. So always be thinking, the tenants that you're targeting, what do they want close to their house? And you might end up with 3 or 4 different maps for each area that you're looking at. You could have one for students, one for blue collar workers, one for young professionals, and one for LHA tenants. And then depending on which tenant profile you decide to go down, you'll have different areas that suit them. So whether you decide to spend 5 minutes on this exercise like I've just done to give you a rough idea of what you're looking for in your area, or you want to spend a couple of hours getting into the real detail of what facilities and amenities are available across your town, it is such an important part of understanding the right location for your next HMO, and I strongly advise each of you to go through this process for a couple of areas to get used to finding exactly what your tenants are going to be looking for.